Well, Professor Robert Spitzer is the author of 15 books, including 4 on the presidency and 5 on gun control. He's a distinguished service professor at the State University of New York College at Cortland. Professor Spitzer, thank you so much for joining us. I want to ask you first about this latest shooting that we saw in Ohio and also Texas. Are we seeing any similarities between the two?
Well, there are some similarities. The motives of the two shooters apparently are different, as you pointed out in your good piece. The Texas shooter was animated very much by what you might call a radical, racist, extremist political agenda. The shooter in Ohio suggests from the information that it was a more personal motive, but the firepower that they both used were the same. They both used assault-type weapons. They both had large capacity bullet magazines, which allowed them to fire enormous numbers of rounds very rapidly. Fortunately, the police intervened pretty rapidly in both cases. Otherwise, the degree of harm and death could have been far greater in both cases. And they, of course, did this in places that were open, public, no strict security regimen at a shopping mall or at a downtown entertainment area. But the firepower is very much of a piece, and that by itself is an unfortunate, indeed disturbing similarity.
I remember growing up, people were often caught in gun violence, innocents often caught in the crossfire of gang violence. Now it seems that innocent people are being targeted, slaughtered randomly. How did we get here, and where do we go from here?
Well, to some degree, mass shootings in America seem to build on one another. That is to say, some mass shooters, at least we know, are inspired by past mass shootings. We know that because they sort of go to school on past mass shootings, acquire information. That's a disturbing trend, but of course in a free society, there's going to be reporting about such events. So that is a concern. Secondly, ever greater firepower is available legally, and that proliferates and escalates the kind of violence. It is important to remember, though, that in America, crime, even violent crime like this, is relatively low, statistically speaking. Crime and violent crime in America overall has been declining for over 25 years, and almost 99% of all murders that occur in the United States do not occur in mass shootings. They occur in more isolated instances in high crime areas located in selected places around the country. So taken as a whole, the country still statistically is very safe. But the rise in mass shootings, their random nature, the anger behind them, the sheer destructive capabilities that are unleashed in mass shootings, nevertheless are deeply troubling, and they need and deserve our full attention.
So here's an obvious statistic: 100% of shootings are thanks to guns, and you've written extensively on gun control. Explain to us, both domestically and abroad, what are the obstacles of getting the type of gun control in the U.S. that people are demanding?
Well, there are a couple of obstacles. First and foremost, the power of the gun lobby to resist those efforts. Secondly, we have a very conservative Supreme Court that about 10 years ago, for the first time in American history, said that average citizens have a personal right to own guns. That was never the law nationwide in the United States. And we simply have a great proliferation of weapons. Roughly 300 million weapons are in the hands of Americans around the country, although it's important to note that fewer and fewer Americans own guns. Even though we have a great many guns in America, fewer and fewer Americans are interested in owning guns, and it is a habit that is actually gradually declining, which has led the gun lobby and the gun industry to try and find various ways to press more guns into civilian hands, to buck up the market for guns, and to provide a political base for the gun lobby to continue its efforts. But sentiments are changing in America. The sentiments in favor of stronger gun laws are more widespread than ever, and we saw in the 2018 nationwide midterm elections for the first time in many, many years that support for stronger gun laws was an important issue that helped a number of candidates running for office around the country to get elected. So there is starting to be a political change that we're seeing. It's occurring slowly. The question is, what's the trajectory of that political momentum in the next few years?
Professor Robert Spitzer, thank you for your insight.